Hi, my name is Kristen Madden. As the archivist at the History Museum, I know that photos are a great way to document our history. From a 1920s photo of a child playing in the snow to a digital image of a new business opening, pictures help tell our history. Please join me as we take a look back at some of the vintage photos in our collection.
Hello, everyone. In honor of Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day, we will be talking about the assault on Pearl Harbor and the life of Frank Frucci Jr., a U.S. airman who witnessed the attack firsthand.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
Pearl Harbor is a U.S. naval base near Honolulu, Hawaii, that was the site of a devastating attack by Japanese forces on December 7, 1941. Just before 8 a.m. on that Sunday morning, hundreds of Japanese fighter planes descended on the base, where they managed to destroy or damage nearly 20 American naval vessels, including 8 battleships and over 300 airplanes. More than 2,400 Americans died in the attack, including civilians, and another 1,000 people were wounded. The day after the assault, President Franklin D. Roosevelt asked Congress to declare war on Japan. These men were aboard the destroyer Ward, operating off the coast of the Channel at Pearl Harbor early in the morning of December 7, 1941. At 6:40 a.m., the Ward went into general quarters after sighting an enemy conning tower. At 6:45 a.m., the Ward opened fire on a midget submarine. The men of the gun crew pictured here were therefore the first Americans to fire a shot against the Japanese. This was taken at Ford Island Naval Air Station at the time of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Sailors look on at the explosion in the distance. Among the planes in the photo are a consolidated PBY, a patrol bomber that could land on both land and sea, and a Vought 051U Kingfisher. Here we can see the damage inflicted on the ships in Dry Dock No. 1 by Japanese planes during the second wave attack. The 2 destroyers, Cassin and Downs, can be seen in the foreground. The Cassin on the right had rolled over into the Downs. In the background is the battleship Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania was not badly damaged during the assault and returned to action December 20, 1941. The Cassin and Downs were unable to be saved. In this image, we can see the wreckage of the destroyer Shaw. The ship was in Dry Dock No. 2, which was a floating dry dock, across the harbor from Ford Island. The ship was hit by a bomb which set off the forward magazine, blowing her bow off. Salvage workers repaired the Shaw, and she returned to sea later in the war. This image shows a tugboat shooting streams of water onto the burning battleship West Virginia. In the foreground, launches help fight fires or pull survivors from the water. The hose-equipped garbage lighter YG-17, a flat-bottomed barge known for ferrying materials and people, sprays seawater onto the stricken West Virginia. Later, it was reported that YG-17 was the first to respond to the fires burning on the ship. The crew members were ordered by their commanding officer to stay alongside until the fires were under control, despite the battleship still taking fire from enemy forces. Though sunk in the shallow harbor, the battleship remained upright when alert crewmen counterflooded her below decks as she began listing heavily after torpedoes hit her below waterline. The West Virginia was eventually raised and returned to action. Born on October 4, 1917 in Niles, Michigan, Frank Frucci Jr. enlisted in the Air Force in October of 1940, almost a year before America was pushed into war. A gunner on a B-17 bomber in the battles of Midway and Guadalcanal, he served for 4.5 years, fought in a total of 82 missions, and attained the rank of Master Sergeant. Frucci was recommended for the Distinguished Flying Cross and would later become the recipient of the Silver Star, awarded for valor in combat, and the Air Medal with 4 oak leaf clusters. Frucci, who was stationed in Pearl Harbor, survived the surprise attack. According to his accounts, "I was sitting on the edge of my bunk at Hickam Field. I reached over to wake my buddy, Bertie Cullingman, from Kalamazoo. We always went to Sunday Mass together, but we had had a few beers the night before, so it was hard getting out of bed. My watch read 5 minutes to 8. I shook my head and said, 'Come on, Bernie, we don't want to be late for church.' Then we heard the explosion. The first bomb shook the barracks. All the soldiers ran to the windows and saw the planes skimming over the palm trees, so close you could have reached up and grabbed them. The planes were shooting into the open street, where they struck the base's fuel storage tanks, which burst into flames. The soldiers stood there, stunned by the sudden landscape of war. No one knew what was happening." Frank Frucci III, Frank's son, once recounted his father's experience. He left his barracks when the bombing started to try and fight, dodging bullets in his unsuccessful attempt to get planes into the air. The only B-17 not destroyed by the Japanese soldiers attempted to take off, but the crew had forgotten to free one of the airfoils, and it began to spin hopelessly in the middle of the runway. As a Japanese Zero zoomed down from the sky, Frucci dived between 2 500-pound bombs to avoid the storm of bullets that chewed up the ground. After it was all over, he went back to his barracks, and the only thing that was standing was his locker and a set of gold clubs. Frucci said it's ironic that his dad's locker was the only thing left, because in the end, his dad was one of the few survivors of that day. After his discharge in August 1947, Frucci operated a family-owned grocery store and eatery called Frankie's Restaurant, which he ran for 45 years. In 1965, he founded the Michigan Association of Pearl Harbor Survivors and served as chairman and state president. He would also go on to serve as the mayor of Niles from 1968 to 1970. Frank was a lifelong member of the Niles American Legion, Niles Elks Lodge, Knights of Columbus, VFW, Moose Lodge, the Niles and Dowagiac Conservation Clubs, and an ambassador of Goodwill of Niles. Frank was also very active in local community affairs. He served a term on the board of directors for Niles Chamber of Commerce and a term on the Niles Recreation Board and Museum Board. He was even appointed to serve on the Tourist Council. In what little free time he seemed to have, Frank enjoyed restoring antiques and war memorabilia, much of which ended up displayed in the family business. On March 16, 2002, at the age of 84, Frank Frucci Jr. passed away at Valley View Healthcare in Elkhart, Indiana. We often hear about World War II and how the war began for America and think of it as just facts on a page or screen, especially as fewer and fewer people remain who remember it firsthand. Frank's son would like to remind us that it is important to remember that day in history. Not only for my father, but for all the men and women that fought and lost their lives, and the families that paid the price to keep us safe.
Thank you for joining me today. This program is a part of our Look Back series. You can find more vintage photos at historymuseumsb.org. Just click on the Look Back icon on our homepage. We're always interested in adding more images to our archives, whether photographs or digitals, from 100 years ago or today. So please contact me if you're interested in donating to our collection. See you next time!